Good afternoon, adventurers. Today we're going to be unboxing and assembling and installing the Smittybilt Gen 2 XL rooftop tent.
You left me all alone, yeah, outside in the cold. Wanted to come over, wanted you to know how I'm getting over. Like I said before, your heart is fucking cold. I'm better off. I'm better off alone. I'm better off, better off alone. I'm better off alone.
What we have here is the telescoping ladder, one of the many improvements that they made from the Gen 1. We have the poles for the vestibule. These are the mounting rails that are going to go on top of your truck rack. We have your shoe holder. We have the poles to hold up your awnings, and ironically, a very nice case. The cover for the rooftop tent when you have it stored away. This was one of the other big improvements. The Gen 1 was Velcroed. The Gen 2 is zippered. The problem with Velcro is that Velcro does wear out after a period of time, but when you're also driving down the road, it lets air in and this thing would puff up and create a lot of extra drag. We have all your mounting hardware and tools. Interior LED light for the tent. So the Smittybilt Gen 2 does come with an interior light. I'm told it's quite bright. We have that as well as the lanyards to tie the ends of the vestibule down. The vestibule is another area where they made a dramatic improvement. First things first, these two triangular pieces, these are for installing the ladder. These plates are for actually attaching the rooftop tent to your rail system. Stakes for the lanyards for the vestibule and the overhang. These plates here are actually going to be what slides into those rails to help attach these plates to your rail system, which I'll show you in detail. These larger bolts are going to be for these plates and these plate systems here for the rails. These bolts here are going to be what's actually going to attach the rails to the rooftop tent, as well as attach the ladder attachment. There's 4 bolts that have 2 washers. Those are going to be for installing the ladder attachment. And then we have 5 bolts with a single washer. Now, I had to think long and hard about this because why do I have 5 bolts? There's 6 holes in the bottom of the rooftop tent. Well, it turns out it's missing parts. I ended up having to go to Home Depot to match one up, which we had to get the exact one because of the way it's designed. These are the tools that we're going to need. These tools came with the kit from Smittybilt. I'd highly recommend that you get yourself a 10 and 13 millimeter ratcheting wrenches. That's going to make your life a lot easier. So now here's the game plan. 10 millimeter bolts with a washer are going to go through these holes, and then the nuts for those are actually going to slide into the inner track here, and that's what's going to bolt the rails to the bottom of your rooftop tent. So our first step is going to be to get 3 nylock washers slid into this channel here. We're going to do that by popping this rubber piece off, and make sure you're choosing the bolts that have the single washer. That's all this one requires. And we'll make sure we put the rubber piece back on so they don't slide out. It's also important to note that we make sure that these are right side up. You want the nylon, why they call them nylocks, is that there's a nylon ring in there. You want those pointed up. And a 10 millimeter ratcheting wrench would probably be the most useful tool to have. One of the things that we found helpful was using one of the provided tent stakes to move the nuts around in the track to get them lined up with the bolts. So a little tip for you there if you guys are struggling with that. Now that we got our bolts tightened, we're ready for the next step. It's very important though that you don't tighten these too much. You can only tighten them so much or else you start kind of crushing the honeycomb floor. All right, now we're ready to mount the ladder brackets. The ladder brackets are going to mount just like this in the pre-drilled holes. And remember, we're going to use the bolts that actually had 2 washers on it because there will be a washer that goes on the inside and a washer that goes on the outside. And we want to make sure that they're pointed down like this. And once we're done, we'll be installing the ladder. Now, we're still going to mount this using our 10 mil socket wrench, but it is going to be helpful for you to have a 10 mil ratcheting wrench as well, because you use them at the same time. Now, given that this bolts directly into the frame, and this is going to be a moving part and what you're going to use for leverage to open and close the tent, it's okay for these to be exceptionally tight. All right, now that that's done, we're ready to get the ladder installed. I went ahead and installed the ladder on my own. I didn't want to belabor that in the video, but a couple things. The brackets for the ladder don't exactly line up with the brackets on the frame. They will either fit on one side or the other side. They don't fit in the middle, and then they don't fit on the outside. It's inside to outside, inside to outside. So people get a little confused on that. I've seen some other videos where people get really confused on these dual plastic washers. You can call them plastic washers, but the formal term for them is actually thrust bearings. What these are for is for rotating metal parts that move, so that metal parts don't create friction with other metal parts. So as your ladder is going to rotate, you don't have metal rubbing on metal. The installation for these is one on either side of your ladder bracket. So both sides are not going to look exactly the same. So you have your bolt, metal washer, tent bracket, plastic washer, ladder bracket, plastic washer, metal washer, and then nut. And it's okay to tighten these down. It'll actually kind of work itself loose as time goes on. This is another bolt that you're going to want to check regularly for tightness, because it does get used and it does move. So you want to make sure that it is checked regularly for safety reasons. All right, now that we've completed the assembly, it's time to mount it on the truck. This is going to require 2 people. This particular tent weighs about 133 pounds. There's no way that I can do this by myself. So we'll get it mounted up on the truck. Whew, all right, now that we got that done, the next step is actually attach it to the rails. And you can see I've already got some screws already in place. I'm only putting 3 on one side. I got 1 more to put on this side. We're going to take this rubber cap off. Use this little aluminum bracket here, and we're going to take the nut and the washer off of these 13mm bolts and place that in there, and it can't turn, so that's what's going to hold it in place. And we're going to go ahead and slide that on. And I've only put 3 of them on for now because that's all I need. So what I need to do now is actually lift this thing up and slide all 3 bolts to the other side of this rail. And then when I get to the other side, I need to lift the other side up and slide 1 bolt on each side to the other side of that rail. And then they're going to bolt to these brackets. And then I'll put the 4th bolt here, which only needs to be on this side. Now you can see that there's 2 sets of holes here for different size rail systems, whether you got a round rail or a square rail like mine for the overhaul. And so that's what we're going to do next. That sucks. All right, now that we got that done, I'm going to put the last bracket in. My next step is going to be to put these plates on with the nuts and washers. I'm going to go ahead and put them on and do it loosely. That way I can center the tent where I want it to be before I actually tighten everything. I think the background music should be that song by Ghetto Boys from Office Space, Damn It Feels Good to Be a Gangster. Damn It Feels Good to Be a Gangster. I'm pretty sure I have that on my phone somewhere. At least I thought I did. Now that we got that completed, we'll put the rubber caps back on. One of the issues that people come across, depending on the type of rail system that they have, is that the bolts wind up being too long. And if you have an SUV, the bolts can actually touch and kind of punch dents into the top of your vehicle. You may have to get shorter bolts depending on the type of rail system that you have. Something else to consider is you can mount this and orientate it different ways. I chose to mount this so that it opened up on the right-hand side of my pickup, similar to a state or national campground. You can orientate this to where it opens up to the back of your pickup. I chose not to do that because it's rectangular, and having something rectangular would create more wind drag and more loss in fuel efficiency. I'm already going to lose fuel efficiency by it being up here, so I wanted to decrease the broad area of that fuel efficiency loss. Hence why I mounted it the way that I did. Now that everything's installed and tightened, we're going to call it a day and we're going to put this thing away. Join us for our next video on deploying it, setting it up, and all the different things that Smittybilt improved on that are different from the Gen 1. And you can decide for yourself whether or not this is the right rooftop tent for you.